All right. Well, this is Compound Fractures. What were we going to call this again? We were going to call it the Stream Chatterbox special, something like that. Today in the news, I have decided to talk a little bit about what happens when governments steal from the poor, when they straight up steal from the poorest of the poor, which happens all the time in pretty well every major city with homelessness, which is, frankly, it's every major city. And here's a little article that popped across my feed about a week ago. I'll get to why I'm covering this today in just a second, but a week ago, this man told his story about how city workers had taken his tent in a rainstorm while he was just down the street a little bit getting a meal from a soup kitchen kind of setup. He was getting a socialized donation meal because he didn't have anything else to eat that day. So, of course, he's going to wait in a line to get the meal. And his tent and all of his belongings inside the tent were gone in the rain. So he had to sleep in the rain the next day. And this happens all the time. We're people too, he says. I guess they are. In fact, I know they are. Everything in it was in a puddle the next night, including me. The experience was the worst alarm clock ever. Now, keep in mind, everyone, this is the city of Vancouver in a country called Canada. Canada gets cold. Even in Vancouver, it does. Vancouver's also a rainforest. It is very, very, very nasty sleeping in a rainforest when it's less than 5 degrees Celsius out. It's awful. You need a tent. The tent is gone. It's terrible. There is no sugarcoating this. It's awful. So moving along, what made me cover this today is that this little video came across my feed yesterday. So I want to share at least some of it. This is in Vancouver, in the downtown east side, a place called Pigeon Park.
So that's what's happening here.
And we're having trouble playing the video. Let's see if we can get it back. If we can't, that's fine.
Okay, so being able to wake up before.
So what's happened here is something that happens again every single day. This is 10 in the morning. There was somebody who was still asleep at 10 in the morning. Great crime.
The cops
and
taking their personal property right in front
I'll
of
leave
them,
it to her.
Re-traumatizing them, and the city does their bidding by cleaning or taking the garbage away. They call people's personal property garbage. So that's what's happening here. I'm gonna just zoom in a little bit. They kicked him awake, you know. Sorry, I didn't have my phone charged at that time to show you that. Like, look at this. They're just continuously just.
What a way to wake up, eh, people?
And he's trying to.
That's enough of that video. There's more I want to show you here. I wanted to show you that our last provincial election happened just a month ago, actually. This is very recent, month and a half ago, I guess. And the Liberal Party, which is the right-wing party here in British Columbia, and they're the party that has governed more often than not for the last several decades, they made a big election promise of ending tent cities. They were going to make sure that tent cities were not a thing in this province. And he talked about strong, disciplined leadership, part of his bold vision. And he phrased it like this. Let's see. We need to end these lawless camps and tent cities in city parks without a provincial mandate, and so on and so on. Lawless camps. Reestablish order on our streets. Very divisive language, call certain activists, and yes, it is, order on the streets. Well, we're dealing with a situation where if you're not in one of these tent cities, you're going to be kicked awake, as we just saw on video, by cops. They're going to throw all of your personal belongings, your property, in a garbage truck. They're going to call it garbage. They're paid by the city to clean up garbage. That's their official job description. And they're going to take absolutely everything you have. Now, just 1 hour before I went live today, so this isn't quite an article yet, but this came across my feed. In Nanaimo, just across the water from us, a smaller place, 60 to 100 people were evicted from the Nanaimo tent city. tent city was torn down, just like the Liberals wanted to do. They didn't win the election, thank God, but happened in Nanaimo anyway. Meanwhile, in the city of Nanaimo, there's only 2 shelter beds available for those 60 to 100 people to share. 2 beds, 60 to 100 people. So there's no shelter space. There's no place for anyone to go. If you stay by yourself on the street, you're going to be kicked awake and have all your stuff stolen. If you stay in a tent city, the tent city is going to be broken up by politicians in cities that are literally running election campaigns on the idea that they're going to break your tent city up and steal your stuff. So the government, in every possible sense, there's literally nowhere for people to go, and their stuff's just going to get taken, and that is just the way it is. Now, this is obviously horrific and wrong, and you'd think that some people would call this city and this province out on that. Canada has a great international reputation, so you'd think that someone would be watching. Turns out people are watching. The UN has sent a representative twice to the city of Vancouver to report back on the conditions within tent cities and within our homeless population, just specifically. So here's a UN representative giving a report 4 years ago in 2016. Spoiler alert, it's gotten worse since then. But anyway, she was horrified as she toured the downtown east side. She was the special rapporteur on adequate housing for the United Nations, came here, visited one of our SRO hotels, which is the step up from a tent city, Another SRO hotel, the Maple Hotel, considered to be one of the better ones. And she said it was shocking and totally unacceptable from a human rights perspective. She described the conditions as something you would find in the third world, which, frankly, I've heard from a number of people who are from the third world. I'm thinking about a memory that popped up on my Facebook account from about 10 years ago, where I was talking to a Somali refugee who was my cab driver, who said that he couldn't describe the situation in the downtown east side to his friends back home in Somalia because they wouldn't believe that it was possible for people to be treated that badly. Talking about a refugee who fled a war. So says something about what our government does to people, how terribly we treat people. So the UN followed up on this a few years later. This was last year. This was just over a year ago. The same person came back, the same representative, and so they looked again at a tent city where an eviction notice had been posted at the time. Since then, by the way, the same tent city has been evicted twice. They've had to go from one park to another park to another park. Some of their stuff was thrown out. Some of it they managed to save in the back of U-Hauls, donated by people who gave a shit. That was good. And she was even more specific here. Under international human rights law, if the city of Vancouver is non-compliant with international human rights standards, that impugns, what is that word? The country as a whole, because it's a national level governments that report back to the UN about their compliance. And so on and so on. Here's the thing. Our government is stealing daily, like straight up theft, straight up employing people to steal all of the personal belongings of the people in our society who have the least. The housing is so inadequate that they will break up a tent city and only have room for 2 people to be in a shelter bed out of that tent city. It is absolutely revolting. Revolting. There's no other word for it. It needs to change. Any government that allows this, whether it's Horgan's government provincially, whether it's Trudeau's government federally, or whether it is our municipal government in Vancouver, all of whom allow it, all of whom let it go, something that violates international law in a very clear way, that the UN has reported violates international law in a very clear way, all of them are culpable. All of them are stealing from the poorest of the poor, not even to give to the rich, just to give to nobody at all except a dumpster. So that's my rant for today. I'll be back soon. Good night, everyone.